Small business war stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes. Hey, lovers of small businesses and good stories in general. Welcome to today's episode. It's a flash episode. And today I sat down with Mat Sorensen, who is a business attorney. And we did a really quick episode, but a really, really useful one. If you are a small business person, you have to listen to this episode. It is called The Things You Should Have Asked Your Business Lawyer. And this episode is worth a lot. It can save you a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of heartache. So if you spend the next 20 minutes with us, you will learn directly from somebody who is an expert about some of the things that you can do to help your business run better from a legal perspective from the get-go, and how to fix it if it's already too late and you've already made some of the mistakes that he warns you against, which happens. We're human. But this episode is brought to you by Proven.com. Proven is a company I started, and it is a small business information hub. We help you run your business better, and we have a small business hiring tool where you can go and post your job to all the job boards in the land and collect all of your applicants in one place. We have thousands of businesses that use this nationwide. Do check us out. Help us out. It's Proven.com. That is how we pay the bills around here. And if you have ideas, I want to hear them. I want to hear about the ideas, the things that you want us to cover on this podcast, things you want us to cover on the blog, blog.proven.com. Email us at podcast@proven.com. I will personally read that email. And yeah, this is your show, so we want to make it helpful to you. Without further ado, let's get into today's flash episode with Mat Sorensen. The things you should have asked your business lawyer. And we are live with today's flash episode of Small Business War Stories. And today I have the honor of having Mat Sorensen, who is a partner at KQS, and he has offices, KQS Lawyers. He has offices in Arizona, California, Utah, and Idaho. And he deals mostly with small businesses. And today we're going to cover the topic, what should you have asked your business lawyer? Welcome to the show, Mat.
Hey, thanks for being here. And I'm the business lawyer, so I'm going to try and fill in the blanks here of what you should have been asking. And I'm excited for this and really appreciate the podcast and all you're doing for small business owners, Pablo. It's awesome to see and hear people's stories and what they're doing. It's kind of the best way, I think, to learn.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's start with some of your tidbits. And what we were talking about before the show is I'd love to hear sort of, for each one of the things that you think you need to ask your business lawyer, kind of a story illustrating why that's the case.
Yeah. So let me just hit the first one. We'll kind of maybe just tack off a couple here, maybe two or three. The first one is making sure you ask your lawyer what is the right structure from a tax and asset protection standpoint. So a lot of people will go out, and this is a common problem we have in our office. They listen to some radio ad, or they get online, or they get some bad advice from somebody. Sometimes it's a CPA, sometimes it's a lawyer, and they set up the wrong legal entity for the type of business they have. Maybe they go to LegalZoom and do it themselves or something, and they forget to get a little advice and get the right structure for their situation. So there's lots of business entity organizational structures you can set up when you start your company. You can just start out as a sole proprietorship, which is what most people should just do. You've sold your first cup of lemonade, you're in business, you're a sole proprietorship, at least as far as the IRS is concerned.
Okay.
So, but eventually people want to set up a company. They want to formalize that. I want to have an LLC. I want to have an S corporation. Maybe I'm a C corporation. And the first thing that we see a big problem with is people set up the wrong entity to start with. And that's a big problem because it sets in a series of tax disadvantages you're going to have, meaning you're going to overpay taxes, and some liability problems you can have if you're not operating properly.
Okay, so bottom line is people can get themselves into a real money pickle. When I first started, I didn't even know what that would mean for me. But as I've been in business for 9 years, what that means, it could mean like my tax bill if I just make the wrong choice in the beginning, my tax bill could be 50% higher or something like that.
Right. Yeah, and you don't know, and a lot of clients don't know. A lot of people come to us and they have the wrong entity, and we say, "Oh, you just need to change to this," and their eyes explode and they immediately love us, and we're saving them taxes now. And
Yeah.
the biggest issue I will say, and this is a big industry in the small business world, a lot of small business owners don't have the money or they don't have the time to go figure out what's the right type of business entity. So they get stuck on whatever they Google or whatever radio ad they hear or whatever seminar they went to, and they set up some piece of junk company in Nevada. And it's worse if they set up a C corporation. And usually these people are not in Nevada. I mean, I can't tell you, I'll bet once a week in our office at least we talk to a client who set up a company in Nevada. Then it's usually the wrong tax classification. It's in the wrong state. They do business in California or Arizona. But somebody told them, or some website or some radio ad said, you need to incorporate your company into Nevada. And that's a big scam out there. And we've seen hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars wasted by people setting up in the wrong state.
Okay.
Because they get sold just that bag of goods that's just one size fits all. It doesn't work for the regular small business owner.
Let's talk a little bit. There are exceptions to that because my company is incorporated in Delaware, even though we do business nationwide, and that is actually a very common thing. How do you distinguish when an exception like that makes sense for you?
Well, our rule of thumb is when a client comes to us, we're going to set up the entity in the state where they do business. That is the most effective way to set up your company is in the state you do business. Why? Because if you have a lawsuit or liability, and let's say you're an Arizona business, you want to have an Arizona judge interpreting Arizona law and your Arizona company protecting you. You don't want an out-of-state entity coming in here. You're going to have a liability in that state where you do business. If you have, let's say, a Nevada company or even a Delaware company and you're doing business in Arizona, like you have a storefront or your operations or employees or you're shipping from there, whatever your business you are in, you own property. Let's say you're in Arizona. You're going to want an Arizona entity for that because you need to be registered in that state as doing business there. So if you set up in Delaware, you still need to register into Arizona. Or if you set up in Nevada, you still need to register in Arizona and pay the fees to Arizona, do an Arizona filing. So now you're paying fees into one state where you're not really doing business. You're paying fees into the state you are doing business. Why don't you just go to the state you are doing business in to begin with?
Makes sense. So your advice is to keep it simple and just incorporate in the state where you're doing business.
Yeah. Now, if somebody there are reasons you could go to Delaware or maybe Wyoming. They're a little more niche. But Delaware would be if you have shareholders, you're raising capital. There's different shareholder rules and benefits there. Otherwise, there's not really a benefit to being in those states. There are some asset protection strategies with Wyoming for people that have significant assets and they're the only owner, but they're very, very limited. 99% of small business owners should start with set up the entity in the state where you're doing actual business.
Okay, makes sense. Can you think of an example where somebody did this wrong and what it meant for them? Like how do things go wrong for them?
Yeah, I mean, we have clients that this is the most common, have businesses in California, set up in Nevada. Someone told them to set up there, and they've been operating out of California for years. All of a sudden, we get a few of these a year at least. And, they're coming to us after the fact, mind you. But they get the California Franchise Tax Board sending them notices saying, hey, how come you're not paying fees to our state? You're doing business here. Oh, and you haven't been paying taxes. And then they get nailed with tons of taxes and penalty. We've had clients get sued in states where their entity is not active. So they've had an entity set up in another state, but they're actually doing business in a different state, and they get a lawsuit there. Now they're in court. They got liability problems of whether the courts can even recognize their entity because they never registered it into that state. So it's a really important issue to get set up in the right state for those two scenarios. You want to stay in compliance with the state tax laws and fees of wherever you're going to operate. You don't need a state tax commission chasing you down, or like the California Franchise Tax Board in California, who's relentless. Nor do you want to be in a situation where you have a lawsuit and you got an out-of-state entity and you're trying to tell a state court judge in the state where you do operate that they should recognize the entity and give you some of the liability treatment of the company. that's been a losing battle for a number of people over the years.
Got it. Cool. What else should people ask their business? And by the way, what is the solution if you don't have, if the thought, let's say that I have an idea for a company and I don't have the money to consult, pay a lawyer fee. How do you solve this? I mean, basically use a shortcut that you just mentioned of incorporating your own state. And how do you figure out what structure to use?
Well, I think a little bit of advice goes a long way. Even, our office, you can do a 30-minute consult, or even just find a good business lawyer you can at least talk to quickly for 30 minutes and get pointed in the right direction. I think that's wise. There are some good books out there to read. My partner's book, The Tax and Legal Playbook, would probably be the best on this subject. It's a Amazon bestseller. You can find it, Tax and Legal Playbook, online or on Amazon. And that'll walk you through how to decide. But let me give people a quick few tips here. So first, as we talked about, set up in the state you're actually doing business. The second thing, when you're thinking about the types of business entities, most small business owners should never set up a C corporation. All right. There's double taxation there, even though the corporate rate went down to 21% with the GOP tax reform. 99% of small business owners should not do a C corporation. What you're going to be looking at is typically an S corporation or an LLC. We usually say use an S corporation if you're an operating business. You're selling goods or services and you're making at least $40,000 of net income. An S corporation is going to say per year, annual net income of $40,000 or more. Okay. And that's after your expenses, net income of $40,000. An S corporation will save you taxes over a sole prop or over an LLC once you're at $40,000 net. If you're just starting out or it's a side business, you're not going to get to that net income number, you may just do an LLC. And LLCs sometimes we use for partnership situations where you may have a lot of partners involved. But really the best entity from our mind for a small business owner with $40,000 or more net income is going to be an S corporation, with the exception of LLCs for partnerships. So that's just a quick tip on where you should go. And I'll just give you an example. I mean, a business owner comes to me and has maybe $150,000 of net income, and they're operating as a sole proprietor. If we put them into an S corporation, they're going to save about $13,000 a year in taxes just by operating out of the different type of company structure. That's how big the tax difference is between those two entities. And that's going to save them. That's going to be a savings every year.
Okay. Got it. What else should people ask? I mean, reading between the lines, what I'm hearing here is, or hearing between the lines, what I'm hearing is don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Maybe spend the money to spend a half hour or an hour with a business attorney that can help you make mistakes. Avoid mistakes that will cost you a lot more money down the road.
Yeah. And you don't have to go, retain a big law firm or pay all the big bucks or whatever. Like I said, 30-minute consult can set you in the right direction. And usually the attorney, if they're good in this area, can give you the advice of what you need. You can go do it on your own if you want to save a buck, or you can have them implement it. And, many times they'll have a reasonable fee. But the reason I bring that up is because that's one of the fundamental things that it's hard to go back and change. If you're operating 5 years into the business and you want to go change because you set up the wrong entity, well, it's a lot more painful, expensive, and complicated to change once you've already been operating for years than it is to get it set up properly in the first place. So that's why I say just getting the right structure from the beginning is critical, because so much tax planning that other things you may do to save on taxes comes from the entity structure. How am I going to pay my kids if I can get kids involved in my business and get a business expense for that? What type of retirement account can I set up to get additional tax deductions? All these little tax strategies. How am I writing off my health care in my business? All these little tax strategies that are awesome for small business owners really flow from the right business structure. And so we want to make sure that you're set up right so you can add on these other things to save on additional taxes, so you don't have to go back and unwind stuff if you get into the wrong structure.
Makes total sense. Sounds good. So what's the next one? What other things should people ask their business lawyer?
I think the other thing that's really important is your key arrangements in your business. Let's say maybe you're a partnership, or you have a key vendor or provider of certain product that you may supply. Making sure you have a clear contract that outlines the terms of how you're going to operate. And I'll give you a couple of specific examples here. In the partnership scenario, if you have a partner in your business, you need to have a contract that is specific to how you are operating together. I'll get clients, and I had a client come to me literally with a piece of paper for buying a business for over $100,000, buying a small business. This person they were buying from was a partner for a short time, and then they were going to buy him out.
Okay.
And it was like a paragraph, okay, of how they were planning to do this. That was their contract. And inevitably enough, they get into a dispute 6 months down the road because they didn't write out an agreement and come to terms. And they didn't even go to the thought process of making an agreement and having to come to these decisions. 6 months down the road, there's a dispute. They can't resolve it. Not only does the business sale not happen, which the buyer still wanted, the seller wanted to get out of and wanted to cash out, the business fails because and becomes worthless because they fight. They can't resolve the dispute. The business suffers. Customers leave, and now there's no value left at all for either of them. So having a proper contract on partnership terms and key arrangements that you have that really add a lot of value to your business are critical. And I just want to point out a couple things, particularly in a partnership agreement, I think is really important to have if you have a partner in your business.
Okay.
The first thing is, I think a lot of people when they do like a partnership agreement, they think, all right, we're going to split profits 50-50 or whatever the arrangement is.
Right.
And they just kind of stop there, right? They're like, okay, we figured out who gets what.
Sure.
Well, that's not very good. You got to hit some other things here. How are you going to make decisions? All right, especially if you have a 50-50 partner. Well, what if you guys disagree on something? How are you going to break deadlock? All right, one thing you may do is if you're in a 50-50 scenario, think of a third party. Like my partner and I, Mark, we have many partnerships between us. We have one person who's a third party, who's just kind of been a business consultant of ours, that we say if we have a dispute, we can't work it out between the two of us, we're going to submit it to this guy, and whatever he says, he's the tie-breaking vote.
That's really interesting. So you're basically setting up like a referee ahead of time. I've never heard of that. That's a really cool tip.
Yeah, absolutely. Because and we've seen this, and that last example I gave is sometimes deadlock in a partnership causes a lot of friction. It ticks people off, and the business suffers. And we've seen a lot of good businesses fail because of a bad contract. And you don't want your business to fail because of that. You want to make sure that you have a strong contract and that you guys have agreed to things in advance. And it sets everybody's expectations. See, when my partner and I know that we're going to let this neutral third party decide, we might come to terms a lot faster because I don't know what this guy's going to say.
Sure.
I don't know what way he's going to go. And a lot of things just aren't worth it. So I'm not going to stick my foot down and say I'm not agreeing to this and be able to halt things. I know things are going to have to move forward. So yeah, pick a third party. The other thing is when you have a partner in a business, you want to say what authority do they have to do something. So you want to say, when can you spend money essentially? When can you hire somebody or change a contract or a vendor or whatever it may be? What authority do you have to do that? But also, and I think some people do an okay job about that, not as great, but they do an okay job. But the thing that gets missed a lot of times is what responsibility does somebody have to do those things? Okay. Many times in a business, you'll have a partnership where it's like, all right, well, what responsibility do you have to do something? They may say, you have all decision-making for marketing. You have all decision-making for finances because you're better at finances and you're better at marketing. Okay, that's fine. But is it their job to do all the marketing? Is it their responsibility as part of the partnership to do the marketing, or do they just have the authority to make the decisions? So
help me understand that. So why is that important? Let's talk about that a little bit more.
Well, let's say that partner falls off the map and you're the other partner and they're supposed to be doing all the marketing or they're supposed to be managing the finances. They're not doing anything. They got some other distraction in their life, some other business, maybe a full-time job or something, and they're leaving you to do everything and still expecting their share of the profits. So you want to be clear that not only did you have the authority to do these things, you had the authority to make the marketing decisions, but it was also your job to do the marketing. It was your responsibility as part of the arrangement of how we were sharing profits that you were supposed to do these things. Because then if you're not, then I'm the other partner left here. I can say you're failing to fulfill your end of the partnership. I'd have a claim if I'm going to have to step in and do everything to then, not cut you in the partnership anymore because you've defaulted on an obligation you had.
Makes sense. Wow. That's something I hadn't thought of.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll just say on the partnership is, and this happens a lot, this problem, and I've seen it in the real estate world in particular, where two partners go in on a property. Let's say one's kind of the work partner in the deal and one person's the cash partner in a deal. And they have a contract, a partnership agreement, and it says, or maybe this is your LLC operating agreement that says, we're 50-50, and it says you're doing all the work and I'm putting in all the cash needed. But what happens if in this business, and this doesn't matter whatever the business is, if you need more money? Let's say you go over budget on whatever your project is, or you're not selling it the way you think you're supposed to, and you need more capital infused into the company. Who's supposed to put that in? Well, if you didn't say that in the agreement, you're going to have a dispute, because I guarantee you the work partner is going to say, well, I'm having to still work, and the cash partner, it's your job to put in money, so you need to put in more money because we need more money. But then the cash partner's like, no, I was supposed to put in X amount of cash, and I already put that in.
Right.
So I'm not putting in more, and you inevitably have a disagreement. This is common, and so you want to define, if we need more capital in the company, is that the cash partner's responsibility? Really? Is it? And it could be. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way to do it. I'm just saying you need to say what it is. On the other hand, if it's and what we will say by default, for example, in our partnership or operating agreements for LLCs is, if more cash is needed in the business, everyone puts in based on their ownership percentage. So if you're a cash partner in a business, and at least our default structure, your obligation is to put in the very beginning capital, and that's it. If you're 50-50 partners with someone else, let's say you need $10,000 in the company to cover payroll or something, whatever it may be, and you're the cash partner, you're only and you're 50% in the business, you're putting in 5. The other person's got to come up with 5 on their end. Now, it doesn't have to be that way, but you want to have that defined, not just so that there's a term in the contract, but there's also an expectation amongst the partners of how that's going to operate when you get there.
So what I'm hearing is that thinking about these problems before they're ever problems can save you a lot of grief down the line, even though it may seem annoying and it may seem like, hey, we have so many things to sell, we have to grow the business, we don't have time for all that lawyer stuff. How do you deal with that objection usually? Because that's the mindset, right? I remember when I was starting my company, I was like, man, lawyers, I don't have any money or time for lawyers. I need to get the business going. Yeah.
Well, I think on both these 2 points that I talked about, the structure or properly documenting a partnership, they really don't take that much time. I know, and I as a business owner myself and being out there in the trenches myself, I get it. It's hard to have to deal with these issues. You want to run the business, deal with your customers. You want to do things that make you profitable. Now, this is kind of like prevention type stuff, but on the choosing the right entity and getting your business structured properly in the right state with the right tax elections, that's going to be a cost on your business. That's going to be a drain on you if you're not optimizing that properly. If you're using the wrong structure, operating out of the wrong state for your entity, that's going to be a cost to you moving forward.
Okay.
So fixing it on earlier, it's easier to fix earlier than later. That's definitely worth taking the time to do, because it will cost you every year to be operating under the wrong tax classification or out of the wrong state. In terms of the partnership, if it's just you and the business, or maybe you and a spouse, the partnership agreement's not, don't stress. But if you have a partner in your business, I think it's a really good exercise to go through that'll actually make your business better. Because a lot of people get into the business and there's some expectation in their mind of what they're supposed to do and what the other partner's supposed to do. But a lot of times people don't talk about it.
Right.
And walking through just a simple checklist of the things you should talk about in a partnership that should go into a partnership agreement really fleshes out a lot of agreement and understanding between people before there's a problem, before someone's pissed off, before people are not going to be level-headed.
Yeah.
And so you got to slow down and write up a contract and maybe get a lawyer involved. But going through that process, I think actually makes you better partners. It sets your mind at ease about how things are going to happen if you get into a problem. And then, as happens in all partnerships, inevitably you're going to have a situation at some point, if the business continues to operate, where what you've talked about and agreed to, hopefully you can just say, yeah, we already talked and agreed to how this is going to happen, and this is what we do. And then there's no dispute, there's no problem.
Sounds good. Before we wrap up, let's just say that I have a business, and this sounds like great advice to me, but I've been operating for 3 or 4 years and I have not done these things. So I maybe don't know
Hmm.
if I have the right structure, and I don't have some of these things in place to have like agreements with other folks about whose responsibility and whose duty is to do what. How
Hmm.
how how do you fix that? How do you even think about going about that?
Well, I mean, just set the time aside. If it's a partner that's involved, let's just say we skipped this step when we got started, and I don't have anything. Sometimes you may not have anything in mind that's like a problem that you're trying to fix, but you just want to get things set straight moving forward. Is just say let's just document this. It's better for both of us, and let's just go through the process of getting a good partnership agreement or operating agreement if you're working out of an LLC. I think that's just the easiest way to approach it, and the sooner the better. Because, like I said, it's difficult to do when there is a dispute and there's an issue looming over you already. Um, Rational minds tend not to be present at that situation. So, but I don't, I don't think it's something you need to stress about either. It needs to be like really a nuisance. A lot of times my partner and I mean, crap, we would used to go surfing. I go visit my partner. Was in Southern California at the time. We would literally go surfing, sit outside on the beach or out on the ocean as we're paddling for waves, and just talk about the things that we know we need to agree to. And once you know what you need to talk about, then you just need to memorialize it into an agreement. It doesn't have to be a conference call with a boring lawyer or, going to some meeting or something. Talk through it, whether it's golf or whatever it is that you like to do with your partner. Talk through it. It's a good time to go through some business issues too, and then just make a plan of attack on how that's going to get documented, whether someone's taking notes and you get it to the lawyer who can help write it up and provide their advice or, critique of any other things that should be addressed. Maybe that's an easier way to try and approach it.
That makes sense. Thank you so much for being a guest today. Where can people find you? What are your, if people have more questions about these things, which I would if I heard this episode, I have already more questions that we don't have time to cover. Where can people find you? What is your website? What is your Twitter? And you have your own podcast. I'd love for you to share that with the audience
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, we've had Pablo on our podcast, on the Refresh Your Wealth podcast. You can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, really kind of everywhere you like to listen to your podcast. So find that's called the Refresh Your Wealth podcast. Our firm website is KKOS. That's Kilo Oscar Sam, KKOS Lawyers.com. You get more information about the firm, our offices, our fees, our practice, what we do. We have a blog there. My website is Matt with one T, MAT Sorensen, Sorensen, MattSorensen.com, where you can learn more about me. I've got a book on self-directed IRAs. That's where people use retirement accounts to invest in alternative assets. It's kind of a big part of what I help clients do. But we're out there helping, self-employed people, small business owners, entrepreneurs all over the country. Happy to help any of your listeners. And please know we have a lot of resources on our website too. That's just free information you can read up on a lot of the stuff we talked about today.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. And let's stay in touch, Matt.
All right, my pleasure.
Take care. Thank you for listening to Small Business War Stories. If you enjoy the show, share it with a friend, or you can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or on our blog at blog.proven.com. If you have an idea for us, we'd love to hear it. Please email us at podcast@proven.com. See you next time. Small Business War Stories. Small businesses are the soul of America. And this is where they tell their stories. I am your host, Pablo Fuentes.